So, ready to have some fun? Yes? Cool. So, as you can see, I'm Paolo. I'm working as a freelancer at the moment for customers in Switzerland. And today, I'm going to be talking about a new way of doing CI/CD. So, we're using serverless functions in order to deploy microservices on Kubernetes using the awesome project Jenkins X. But let's start from a little bit of background from the really beginning. So, who here is working in agile projects? Please, you can raise your hand. So I can see a little bit. Yeah, almost everybody. Cool. How many of you are actually deploying code on production on daily basis? Oh, not bad, not bad. Usually there is always one guy, which is following me in every conference, but he's not here today. So what's agile for me? For me, it's just about a quick and continuous feedback loop. Why? Because we have to adapt and change fast in order to delight our customers, because our world is changing extremely fast, of course. And if we go back to 2001, a group of 17 luminaries gathered together in order to, let's say, discover and kind of codify ways how to develop software better. And this is the Agile Manifesto. So we are speaking about, this has been written by people like Kent Beck, Martin Fowler, Robert Martin, Uncle Bob, basically. And as you can see here, the already first principle here is talking about continuous delivery of valuable software. Probably was not really the same as we intended now, but they had already a rough idea. And what have we been doing in the past, let's say, 17, 18, 2019. So what have we been doing now? What I have seen in the project, this is something like this. It's war. You see smoke. You see gunfire. You see people like dead on the floor. And if you check in this corner, you see the product owners. So, I mean, I know everybody of you knows the tension. So if you have to deploy on production, normally you take a sick day. So you don't show up in the office normally, because you don't know who wants to deploy on production. We have a lot of heroics, gunfire, so not really, let's say, so kind of stressful. And why? In my opinion, we have normally big bang releases, so huge chunks of software deployed almost manually. Something is automated, but there is always someone, let's say, kind of hacking around. And of course, we have always the poor guy, you know, clicking around for testing. And that's why, I mean, no one wants to be a tester nowadays, I guess. And yeah, the problem is lack of automation, basically. But let's take a step back. We have seen in the last, let's say, 5, 6 years, we have seen huge changes with the rise of containers. So the most popular one probably is Docker, and container orchestrators in order to deploy and manage containers at scale. And the de facto standard nowadays is Kubernetes. But so Kubernetes containers are really awesome. I really encourage everyone to try Kubernetes. But of course, we have a problem normally as developer or operation guys. We come up with new frameworks, with new technologies, libraries, whatever. And what do we end up with? With new problems. So we have, of course, new challenges, because also Kubernetes is, I mean, difficult to set up and maintain. You need skills, and the learning curve is pretty steep. Boom. It's really, really complicated. So what do we do? But did we forget actually anything? So here we are just talking about the operational side. infrastructure, let's say health checks, making sure your application is up and running. But what about delivering business values? Because at the end, that's what our customer is paying us for. And in order to do that, we have this new project, Jenkins X, which has been published around 1 year ago. So it's pretty new, sometimes still probably shaky, but it's, believe me, really promising. I will show you a demo shortly. Hopefully the demo gods are with me and the Wi-Fi as well. And what is Jenkins X? Jenkins X is a reimagined CI/CD for basically cloud-native applications on Kubernetes. And it's heavily inspired by the Accelerate book, so written by Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble and Jean Kim. And it's basically talking about building and scaling high-performing technology organizations. So I really recommend you guys to have a look at it. I really enjoyed also reading this book. What are the Jenkins X capabilities? So we said setting up Kubernetes is hard, deploying microservices is also, it takes a while. So with Jenkins X, you can spin up easily a Kubernetes cluster on your provider of choice. The best one at the moment, or the most, let's say, stable is on the Google Cloud Platform, so Google GKE. But it supports also Amazon, Azure, so you can also try it. And basically, it doesn't only just spin up a cluster, but also installs a bunch of tools we need on a daily basis for developing software, like CI/CD pipelines, like an artifact repository. Depending on the installation, you might even have a Docker registry, a repository for storing Helm charts, which are basically the, let's say, the way to deploy Kubernetes manifests, so with a package manager. And Jenkins X started with version 1.0 1 year ago, as I said, and it was still using under the hood a static Jenkins master. But it was not really, let's say, so Jenkins is awesome, so it's the most used CI server in the world, but of course it was not designed for the cloud. And basically, so it was hard to scale to different teams. There were sometimes plugins incompatibilities, or sometimes you run out of disk space. So Jenkins 2.0 introduced in the last few months, basically serverless pipelines. So you just, let's say, specify a pipeline, normally using the YAML, which is, I find it pretty ugly, actually, but especially for indentation. But that's the standard. So you define a YAML pipeline, and basically, instead of having a CI server continuously running, you just use a sequence of functions which perform something, and basically, they just are shut down, garbage collected, that's it. You don't pay for a CI server continuously running. And this is also pretty scalable if you have enough power in your Kubernetes cluster. So under the hood, Jenkins X is using Tekton. So it's basically the new project for Kubernetes native CI/CD pipelines. Before was called the Knative build. So it's the first part, basically, of the Knative project, which evolved. And yeah, now we will try to see also something, no boring stuff anymore. OK, so as you can see, let's see if the Wi-Fi is still there. Yeah. We basically, yeah, I have to select the project again. And let's see. No internet. You know, always the demo gods, but I'm used to it. Let's see. Doesn't look that good right now, but it should be, probably. coming really soon. So in the meanwhile, oh, there is some kind of sign of life. So basically now what I want to show you is what has been installed. So I just used the JX command line tool, so JX create cluster. So for example, if I just switch back to my console here, I hope you can see, so let's make it a little bit bigger. So you just type, for example, JX create cluster, and then you can choose the provider you wish. In my case, I used, for example, GKE. This spinned up a Kubernetes cluster with all the tools. So you can see some tools over here. Let's just go quickly through them. So we have a webhook. We said there is no static Jenkins master in here. So if I just scroll down, you see some controllers, some other applications like Nexus, for example, my backup application, because who knows, everything can happen. But no static Jenkins master. So we need a webhook handler, and the webhook handler is called Prow. It's used also for the Kubernetes and Istio repositories. It's basically just getting, let's say, webhooks from GitHub, reacting accordingly, also according to the plugins we specified, and also interacting with the GitOps. We will see that shortly. We have also a bunch of tools. We can see, for example, Chart Museum, so for storing Helm charts, a bunch of controllers, including some garbage collectors. And we can see also some, basically, tool for visualizing Helm chart, Nexus for artifacts, and the Tecton pipeline controller at the really bottom here. So this guy is going to react, basically, to our commits and spin up a pod with a sequence of containers, basically functions running in there, in order to execute our pipeline. Same stuff, of course, can be seen from the CLI. So we can get, for example, environments. Wi-Fi, yeah. So Jenkins X spinned up, by default, 2 environments. We have a staging environment and a production environment. So staging is basically just automatic deployment environment. So every time we create a microservice, import a microservice, just commit something, this is going to be built, tested, packaged in a Docker container, and deployed automatically to staging. Production, at the moment, for the default installation, as you can see in this column here, is still manual. But we can change it if we have enough automation in place, and if, let's say, our project and our people is pretty skilled and mature. So Jenkins X, why do we see that? Because Jenkins X is using the new concept of GitOps. So we don't just have the infrastructure and the code as a Git repository, but also the environments. So at the moment, for example, staging production, you can define new ones, and every application deployed on the environments is going to be also on Git. So it's also awesome for disaster recovery, for rollbacks. And as you can see here, we have also the link to the GitHub repositories, which are at the moment in my personal account. You can see just a repository, not that much in there right now. So we have a requirements file, and that's what we will see something. As you can see already here, we have, for example, my J on the Beach backup application up and running there. Same stuff is going to be for production. Now, we want to see also something else. Of course, we have the pipelines defined, and nothing really, let's say, no rocket science also here. We can see the pipelines associated with the repositories, with production and staging, and of course, now my microservice. We can get the status of the cluster, so if everything is OK in terms also of which kind of load we have, hopefully, yes, it's going to come soon. So we have 3 nodes, 13% of memory used. CPU is around 50% at the moment. OK. So now I would start creating a new microservice live on stage. So we can create different types of microservices. For example, since it's, of course, a nice Java conference, basically, or JVM conference, so probably I will use Spring. But you can use also different type of languages. So, for example, you can use Golang. You can use Rust. So let's say I will abort it. So I want to show you the languages. So you can see Golang, for example, over here. You can see Node, Python, and so on. You have pretty many quick starts. But let's start with a Spring application. So JX creates Spring. So we are creating a new microservices. Our environment, everything is set up. I want to create a new microservices using my GitHub account. So what's going to happen? Let's say J on the beach rocks. So we use Java, but we could have used also the new funky and shiny Kotlin or Groovy. Group name doesn't really matter. We need a few dependencies. So the actuator is the Spring Boot dependency for health checks. And we will be exposing some web, so REST, basically endpoints. So we need a web dependency. So now Jenkins X is just delegating, in this case, the Spring Boot initializer in order to generate a bundle of files. Is initializing automatically a Git repository for us, and applying the so-called draft build pack. What's a build pack? Here you can see, for example, pack Maven. So draft is recognizing which kind of service we are creating. For example, inspects the POM in case of a Spring Boot application or Java generally application, and is adding a bunch of additional files so that we don't have to care that much about, let's say, all the mechanics of deploying an application to Kubernetes. So it looks like also the repository has been pushed to GitHub. So in a few seconds, as you can see, we have created a super simple microservice. Let's inspect a little bit what has been created here. Just let's move this over here. Oh. Anyway, doesn't really matter then. We have the J on the beach rocks, but I first actually want to enter the repo. I'm using, just for the sake of the demo, VS Code, as you can see. So we can see we are dealing with a Spring Boot application. You can see the Spring Boot starter, a few dependencies. We said actuator and web, and something for testing, of course, because we should be using TDD. But sometimes what I see in the project, actually the people is using is a methodology called JDD. So it's Jesus-driven development, basically. Just hoping for the best, you know. Yeah. So basically, we have a POM. As you can see, you have the Spring Boot application runner. We can see also a bunch of additional files. We can see a Docker file, super simple. It's actually still using the JDK. So hopefully my pull request is going to be merged soon. There is lots going on at the moment, but doesn't really matter. So I would like to have smaller Docker images, so it's easier moving them, and also you have a smaller attack surface. But at least here, at the really bottom, you can see we are using the experimental features because we are talking about the JDK 8, here. So JDK 8 by default didn't really recognize the C groups, so basically the mechanism inside the Linux kernel in order to constrain resources to processes, CPU, memory. So otherwise, sometimes the application might blow up if you just containerize it and start. We can see also another nice file. Don't worry that much what's in there, but just think this is the definition for a tool called Scaffold. And Scaffold is basically a tool in order to abstract how we build Docker images and basically push that to a registry, deploy them also in case. At the moment, we are still using, basically here, there is the Docker daemon, so probably not the best in terms of security, but you can use also different ways. So you could use Jib, you could use Canico if you are building Docker images inside the Kubernetes cluster, and you configure everything in there. We have, of course, also, before we had a Jenkins file, I think you all remember, with the Groovy DSL. And now, actually, we have another definition. It's the Jenkins X YAML pipeline. And it's pretty complicated, I'm sorry. So in this case, since it's a simple microservice, it's just using basically a default build pack for Maven. And this is provided by Jenkins X. I think I have also already in the history a repository, for example, for Jenkins X Classic and Kubernetes. We have a bunch of build packs, for example, for Jenkins X Classic. It means basically if we are classic in terms of if we are deploying or building just a library, we can see a pipeline. And important to see here is the release lifecycle. As you can see, you have a bunch of steps. Each step is going to run in a container. I think all of you guys recognize also this here for building, testing, packaging, and pushing our artifact. And that's it. So at the moment, our application is just delegating basically this build pack, but we can customize it. We can override steps, like in object-oriented programming, where we extend classes, override methods. You can do exactly the same. It's pretty cool. And last but not the least, we have an Helm chart. So Helm package manager, at the moment, kind of standard for Kubernetes. We have a bunch of Kubernetes manifests, for example, a deployment object. We have a service in order to expose our pods inside the cluster. And of course, in order to customize all this stuff, we have some values. So for example, here we can see we will have just one replica running. We can specify resources for the pod. We can specify, configure a little bit liveness, readiness checks for health checks, self-healing mechanism for Kubernetes. That's it, more or less. So now in the meanwhile, I hope something is going on here. So let's recap. We created a microservice. We basically applied the build pack. Now it's ready to be deployed. We have a Git repository. A webhook has been sent to our webhook handler inside the Kubernetes cluster. So hopefully, without bugs, without problems, we should see some build logs. Otherwise, probably I will just have to dance on stage. So we see, for example, our microservice, Jay on the Beach Rocks. So now it's getting the logs from the build pod. So everything has been basically built inside a bunch of containers. We can also see, for example, JX get, I think, get pods. No. Too many comments here. I think I will show that probably is more visible actually in the GCP. Let's see. So we should see a bunch of pods. Here they are. Oh, yeah, those guys here. So we have a bunch of pods which run the pipeline. As we said, we are using GitOps. So there is one pipeline which is building the service. So here you see J on the Beach Rocks master branch. And above, you can see environment. So basically, we have two pipelines for the staging environment. Every promotion to staging or production is done through pull requests. So we open a pull request in the staging environment, so in the staging repo in Git. We build it, validate it, and push the application to staging. So we can get also the logs for these guys. OK, as you can see, for example, we have PR and the master branch for the staging environment. We have also some logs. Hopefully, there is no error, no problem. No good. Probably since the Wi-Fi, it's kind of shaky. But anyway, you can see some more logs. If I refresh here, hopefully I should see a second microservice, because we said I had a backup. Come on. We should see now, while it's loading, our applications in the staging environment. It's kind of, otherwise I will just have to tether from my phone, I guess. Let's see. Sample pinging Google. Latency. I will try also activating my mobile hotspot, I guess. And if you are using Wi-Fi, please shut it down for a second, guys. You are going to be happy. Not that much still going on here. Let's see. Let's see if I have a better luck with my phone. OK. So never trust conference Wi-Fi. So here, oh, whoa, whoa. We see our microservice. So J on the Beach Rocks on the staging environment. One replica is running. And we can see that also from the CLI. So JX get applications. And we should see two applications, the backup application and the new shiny microservice deployed version 001, deployed in the staging environment. Cool. We have even a link. So with the magic generated now an IP.io domain. So I didn't register for, of course, for the demo, a domain name. So we can click, and we will see the super nice Spring Boot error page. That's the default, of course, if we don't specify anything. And since there is no trick, so let's get the actuator metrics, some health checks. So the application looks like it's up and running. Now, what do we want to do now? Now we want to add some logic. Let's add a super complicated REST endpoint. Forget for a second the single responsibility principle. So please, Uncle Bob, forgive me. And let's create some get mapping method with the hello endpoint. Just let's return a super simple string. No No parameters, doesn't really matter now. And so, really complicated. Okay, I have also to create a new branch. For example, the new endpoint. Okay, let's try to push it. Hopefully there is no problem with the tokens, otherwise I will just use another client. It doesn't look that bad. So now let's commit our new endpoint. And push our branch. So let's check if everything is okay here. It's not the backup, so refresh. Yeah. Let's see if the branch is in here. Yeah, it looks like this. So we have a branch. Now we can also open a pull request, either from GitHub or your client of choice. There is also a new cool plugin for VS Code, so I can create a new pull request now, which is basically trying to add the endpoint and asking basically to be merged into the master. So pull request has been created. Nice. We can see that we can review either from here, from VS Code, or from GitHub. You can see our changes. So now, of course, in a normal project, we know what happens. So we can start fighting about coding standards. And once we are basically satisfied, we can merge it. And let's see something here. So Jenkins X, at the moment, is using my GitHub token. So you see a comment which apparently I wrote, but actually is just a bot. And Jenkins X is embracing also the concept of chat ops. So operations also through chat, let's say, conversations. So we can keep track of what did what and who wrote what. And also we can basically delegate the webhook handler in the Kubernetes cluster to build, let's say, validate at least, and merge also the pull request. How do we do that? Normally, we write some comments. So let's do something really useful. I mean, we always do, of course, as developers. So now, so Prow should actually reply with something really useful. Everyone loves cat pictures. Cool. If we are satisfied, normally we can write, for example, looks good to me. But there is a trick here. So at the moment, I created the pull request, so I'm not going to be able, let's say, to merge it through chat operations. Of course, this guy is pretty clever and say, hey, you cannot merge your own pull request. You need a review. So we are going to force it right now. But if you are working in a team, you just have to have another guy which is validating and approving your pull request. And in order to do that, you have to add the approved reviewers in a so-called owners file. Now, by default, it's just me. But anyway, it's just a template. It doesn't really work if you're trying to merge your own pull request. So let's force it. You didn't see that? OK. But in the meanwhile, while basically the new updated master is building, I want to show you something else also. So normally, I mean, we can review the code, but we want to also test the application, maybe perform some load testing. Maybe if we are merging some front-end changes, we want to have a look at them. So Jenkins X is pretty cool because it spins up automatically a container, so an ephemeral container, which will be running for a short while, which allows us also to really validate the changes. So for example, and we have also a comment here. So Jenkins X is already pointing us to that dynamic temporary environment. So we can click. Of course, this is the default page, but we should have the hello endpoint. So, hello. Cool. Now, still a few things. So we can get back to the build logs. In a short while, we should see actually the staging pipeline kicking in again. So as you can see here, we have the master release number 2 with our hello world endpoint. Can get some logs, probably now there is not yet that much because it's just started, and this is going to deploy the application again on staging. What's also cool, at the moment I use VS Code, but you can also, there is the concept of the dev pod. So normally if you don't want to spend time setting up your environment, or you have a new developer on board, you don't want to, let's say, waste a lot of time setting up tools, dependencies, or your local machines, you can spin up also a container in Kubernetes and just develop on that container. And also, I prepared that before, because it takes quite a while. So it's already, we have already the developer, let's say, pod up and running. And this is using a web-based IDE. So basically coming from VS Code, it's called Thea. And nice, we can now just open a web link and start developing. Isn't that awesome? I think it's really promising. Now, if we want to, now we are on staging, we said. So our application, of course, will be here. And we have already the 002 running on staging. OK, I didn't expect that fast. Nice. Let's see if it's the container already started. Soon we should see, of course, the application. And if you want to promote to production, there are 2 ways. Either you use the JX promote command, which is saying which environment, production, and this is going to basically open a pull request on production, and a pipeline will kick in again with the serverless functions inside the containers, inside the pod, and deploy the application to production. This command, now I'm not going to try it because it's still a little bit shaky, so it might be actually a waste of time. And my recommended way, let's see if we start it, J on the beach rocks. So now we are not anymore in the preview environment, but in the staging environment. Wow, it's running. So how much time did we invest? Not that much to create a simple application. Of course, you can also import existing applications. And for that, you have the JX import command. Cool. If you want to open a GitHub issue, you can also, let's say, create issue. You can also create a new issue on GitHub, for example. And that's it. So pretty end-to-end automation. So we have also already a GitHub issue over here. So I was saying, if you want to deploy on production, my suggested way, actually, if you don't have that much automation at the beginning, you can just go to the production environment. And here, you can basically open a pull request, which you say, I want now J on the beach rocks on production. And someone is going to validate it and approve it. So if we go to staging again, we said we deployed a few, so 2 microservices. We are embracing the concept of, not here. We are embracing the concept of GitOps. And as you can see, we have the two microservices represented in Git. So whatever you deploy is here. If you lose the cluster, you can just recreate everything from scratch, like how basically you could do for the infrastructure using Terraform or some other tools like this. Cool. So that's it at the moment for the demo. I would like just to add a few slides before some kind of QA time. So Jenkins X is really promising. It's awesome. I think in a few years, it's going to probably be one of the, let's say, most used projects and tools for CI/CD in Kubernetes. But as everything, it's not a silver bullet. You still, need something. Because what I have seen right now, actually the biggest issues are not technological issues normally by customers. They are people issues. So it's not about normally legacy code, it's about legacy people. So my also additional take-home message is also never stop learning, always being curious about new stuff, trying new things, keep sharing information, but also vulnerability, because that's actually the only way we can cooperate and trust each other. So I thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Paolo. So, I've been experimenting this JDD these 2 months ago.
And yeah.
We were building all this Kubernetes stuff with Jenkins, old Jenkins, and also with Bitbucket. We've been suffering during 2 months to get the first, loop working on. So, yeah, I understand that. What are the good benefits? Don't know how it behaves with the Bitbucket and Amazon, but if it is that easy, wow, amazing. I'm gonna check for the questions. So. And
this is my Twitter. So tweet about me.
Yeah. So yeah. Let me refresh.
So yeah, just don't search for Paolo Carta, but just the Twitter handle, because it's really hard to find me online sometimes, because the husband of Laura Pausini is actually called also Paolo Carta. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, so we have one question here, which is about is it possible to include Istio inside the Jenkins X?
Awesome question. I will reply like this. JX create add-on. So we have here a few add-ons, and we see some guy here. So there is also the Istio add-on, and a few more actually. Prometheus,
amazing.
Security checks.
Amazing. Any other questions, guys? I'm gonna check again. No, it looks like there are no more questions. So thank you very much, Paolo.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And yeah, in case I will be hanging out here if you have additional questions or you want to discuss something. Thanks.